Good afternoon and welcome to today's daily support call. We're really fortunate today to have Imran Saleem, financial expert and part-time instructor at U of T. He's also my brother-in-law, which is exciting. So we've become friends over a decade now, which is amazing when you think about it, how much life has changed. And that's actually why we're here today, Imran, is to talk about this unexpected and sudden change in life. And for many, there's been this strong reaction to fear, the panic, the toilet paper hoarding, the sky is falling. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's been those that don't take it seriously enough and figure it's just another blip in human history and we're all overreacting and we'll get through it just fine. So I wanted to talk today about some of the things that have come up in these calls. The recurring theme of where's the middle ground? What can I do from home to continue making money for my family, to keep ourselves safe and well fed? Just how panicked should I be? What's going on with the economy? What's going on with everything in the world right now? And it's a lot to cover. So we've had various people offering various insights. The one common element we've seen more than anything on these calls, and you and I were talking about it just before we started recording, was really that sense of connection that's come about through this, that recognizing that no matter what station in life we have, rich, poor, successful, not as successful, no matter what it's been, we're all affected by this. It's been indiscriminate. So that's really all I wanted to say. Let's get the conversation rolling. What have your insights been through this experience?
So first of all, thank you, Marcus. And for those of you that are listening, welcome. And it's my pleasure to be here. Um, it's a whirlwind, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening. As you said, economically, there's a lot of things happening, from a personal perspective, not just for me, but for everybody else. It's, you ask yourself the question, is this the slow and steady anymore, or do you need to make some drastic adjustments or changes to your lifestyle, whether it's on the financial side or the personal side? And how do you make some of those decisions? I am no expert by any means. I'm sure there are bigger and better experts than I am out there. My viewpoint is that obviously it depends. It depends on your own personal situation. It depends on how comfortable you are financially, speaking specifically first on the financial side, how comfortable you are financially. What decisions have you made so far? Where are you in that whole life spectrum? Are you starting a family? Is your family, well settled? Are you starting to move and think more towards retirement? So in terms of where you are financially from that perspective, what type of assets you have, what type of assets are they liquid, are they not liquid? How quickly can you turn them into liquid also? So there's so many questions out there in terms of enabling good financial well-being. But all of that said, you hit the nail on the head, Marcus. It's a whirlwind, right? It's about everybody's trying to figure out what the right medium is. A lot of people are just hearing about potential job losses and whatnot, and us being Canadians and taken through, we like to help each other. We like to stay focused. We like to take care of our neighbors. And I would say, let's not forget as much of that as possible. Let's make sure, yes, we put our families first, but let's make sure that we also think about our neighbors, our communities as much as possible. Give to those that are needy in this time, because I'm a strong believer in karma. Karma does come back, and it does help out, or it does catch up to you at some point in time. So I would say, it depends on what everybody's situation is like. It depends on where everybody's going with their own life. It depends on, are they stuck at home and they just can't figure out what to do next? Are they trying to figure out where the next meal is going to come from? It's, there's a lot of things out there. So first and foremost, be thankful. Be thankful for your health. Be thankful for what you do have rather than what you don't have. Also be aware of things that are happening around you, in your own household, to your neighbors, in your community. And as I said, be a good Canadian and help out to those that need help.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. We've talked a lot about those types of things this week. One of the greatest analogies that came up, and you did nail it on the head, is the idea of the flight attendants that give us the instructions before the plane goes. And there's that one section that I think people overlook, and it's when the oxygen mask falls, attach yours first before helping another. And I've seen a lot of businesses, a lot of individuals that are giving of themselves and self-sacrificing to the point where they're not really taking care of their needs and their family needs first. So it's take care of you so that you can better help others is really what it's come down to. So, I mean, some of that was kind of generic. So I want to dig in if you'll allow me. Let's talk about what your financial life was like prior to this voluntary, somewhat self-imposed isolation. I mean, what were you doing before all of this work from home happened?
So, I mean, I have a pretty hectic lifestyle, I would put it like that. You know, I've got a day job that typically keeps me occupied 50, 60 hours a week. As you mentioned, I am also a part-time instructor at UFD, so that takes care of me another 10 hours a week or so. And then the remaining time that I have, it's busy at home with the kids and the families. So I really didn't have a lot of free time to begin with. Um, Obviously, that has changed quite a bit in the last 2 weeks or so in terms of how I've been spending my time. Obviously, the commute's not there anymore, so you take out, you get back 2.5 hours a week of your day just from not commuting. Um, just having to work in isolation or in having to work, from the comfort of my home, and using Zoom to the best of my ability, and just, communicating with my colleagues over Zoom. So that's evolved and that's changed. Um, Eventually, it's, you get to a point where, the first week you start enjoying it. The second week you start accepting it. And the third week it becomes the new norm, right? And I think that's where I would say that I'm at in terms of my own evolution with regards to working from home, and and trying to figure out what the new norm is. So yeah, I mean, this is the new norm. This is the way that things are going to be, at least in my opinion, the next 6, 8, 10 weeks, if not maybe a bit longer. And we have to do our best to make sure that we understand what it means for ourselves, and just stay occupied, right? Keep your brain occupied, keep your mind occupied, figure out things to stimulate them as much as possible, whether it's work, whether it's Sudoku, whether it's, pick a puzzle or something like that, right? Just do, as long as your brain is stimulated, you're going to be okay. Um, Financially speaking, I've got a couple of different questions, not just from you, Marcus, just a couple of other pieces, some friends, some clients, and whatnot. With regards to what should they do about their own money, right? What should they do about, should they cash out? Should they not cash out? And what I tell them is that if you haven't cashed out already, it doesn't matter anymore, right? And now it's ride it, and eventually it is going to come back up, predominantly because the fundamentals of the market, of the financial market as we know it, didn't change. Obviously, if you think about it, this started back in December, back in Wuhan, and by the time it hit the markets, it had about a 2.5, 3 month lag time to it. Likewise, as soon as we have the a cure for either the virus or the new norm, and people start getting adjusted to it, a lot of these players that are sitting on the sidelines are going to start picking up some of these financial assets that are out there.
No, you still there, Imran? Hmm.
Financial assets. And I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me properly, Marcus?
Yeah, we're good. We're stabilized now.
Okay, all right. So, a lot of folks that are close to retiring are actually more worried. And, I look back to 2008, 2009, when the mini recession hit us. And I would say that the market was back to where it needed to be in, about 9 months or so, right? So essentially, keep in mind that the fundamentals of the market haven't changed. Obviously, companies are not making revenue because we aren't spending. We aren't spending because we're staying at home. So the minute we start going out, we'll start spending at restaurants, we'll start spending at the coffee shops, we'll start buying things. When we start buying things, the companies will start spending money. The companies will start spending money, then more and more people will get hired. And again, it's a cycle, right? So again, I would say that, financially, I've taken a hit.
Okay, so it seems we might be having internet troubles again. That's okay, these things happen. We'll just give it a minute and see if he manages to recover. All right, so it appears that we have lost our guests. So what I will do is just pause the recording for a quick minute, everyone. And yeah, we're not gonna edit or anything. There we go, here he comes again. And we're back.
Oh, sorry about that, folks.
Oh, that's okay. It's part of the joy of this working from home in technology. And again, it's like you said, all these events are happening and really we have no control over the events, but it's the meaning we give to the events. It's how we respond to them. So as simple as, having someone drop from a Zoom call, we can either freak out and be upset by it or realize, you know what, it's an overloaded system because everybody's on it right now, doing what they need to do to survive. So that's the way I look at it. I'm, again, still grateful that you're here with us.
No worries. And it's called YouTube in my house. I'm sure there's about 5 different devices connected to YouTube right now upstairs. So,
well, and it's funny that you mentioned that. So let's talk a little bit more personally, because you did talk about how prior to all of this, you had the job that was taking 50 to 60 hours. Then you had a bit of commute, so you're saving 2.5 hours. So again, very personal for you. I'm sure some people watching this will be like, wow, that's your weekly commute is 2.5 hours? Because I know many people do that in a day if they have to commute downtown and back every day. Now, I also know, so without going into too many details, because it's not my place to say, but in addition to your full-time job, you do have other assets, you do have other streams of revenue, you do have other income. So how has things affected that? So, I mean, directly, you're still working from home, you're still getting some things done, you're still taking care of the household, but how have your other investments been affected by what's been going on?
sure. So just a clarification. So it is 2.5 hours a day, not a week. So it's
Oh, a day. Okay,
a day.
perfect.
It is 2.5 hours a day for me as well in terms of going to downtown. Um, so from a personal perspective, like I said, I've taken a hit in the market in terms of some of the stock that I do own. And like everybody else, I like to dabble in stocks, but it is gambling money, right? And I do want to state that out loud. Talk to your financial advisor if you need any specific guidance on what to do or what not to do. But people generally invest in financial assets for the long term. And if you are doing that for the long term, you are more likely than not to make a decent return on it, as long as you buy something that's well diversified and it's not too risky. Financially speaking, yeah, I mean, the entire market's been down about 45 to 60%, depending on what you do own. I've been down something similar on that side as well. And yes, I am blessed that I still have a job that I'm able to pay my bills and whatnot. One of the things that you're currently hearing about in the news, especially as we get closer to April 1st, is around real estate and rentals, and what do or what should um, renters do, especially if they've lost their jobs and whatnot. So I do want to commend our Premier Doug Ford for saying outright that no one will be evicted for not being able to pay their rent due to COVID-19. I think that's an amazing statement. I think it gives a lot of credibility to people about the system that yes, things might get delayed a little bit, but we're not necessarily going to kick anybody out just because they haven't been able to pay their rent and they've lost their jobs for COVID-19, and that the system needs about 2 or 3 weeks to catch up to it, right? In terms of all of the additional payments that are supposed to be coming through from either the federal government or the provincial government. I know that a lot of people are worried about, okay, should I pay my rent? Should I not pay my rent? How will that work? Um, I would say, put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? If your rent's $1,000 and you can pay 200, pay 200. If your rent's $5,000, maybe you should really rethink about some of your financial situations in terms of, why do I have a rent that's $5,000, right? Maybe I should have bought a while back, but that's a personal decision. My guidance or my suggestion to all of you is obviously, there's human beings on the other side as well in terms of your landlords and whatnot. Some of them could be jerks, and I recognize that, but most people are just nice and they're trying to build up some equity for their families, right? So my suggestion to you would be is if you're a renter, pay what you can, especially if you are working, then continue to pay what you have been paying. If you're a landlord, recognize that some of your tenants are not going to be able to pay or pay on time. Work with the banks, see what type of deferral options they can come up with. At the end of the day, just be cognizant of the fact that the banks aren't going to let anybody go away scot-free. While they might give you a month, 2 month, or 3 month deferrals, the banks are in the business of making money. Companies, corporations generally are in the business of making money, and a lot of their money is tied to commitments such as mortgages and whatnot. So while they might give the landlord a deferral of 1, 2, maybe 3 months, at the end of the day, the landlord still has to make payments. And if you're out of job and you can't pay the landlord the rent, the landlord might have 1, 2, or 3 properties such as that. What if they themselves are out of job, right? How do they make their own mortgage payments on the house, right? So again, my suggestion to the tenants is that pay what you can. Be aware that it's not a one size fits all. So do what you can. And my advice to landlords are, be aware of what hardships your tenants might be going through, and make decisions accordingly from that perspective. So that's what I would
Right.
say.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're circling around to the same answers again and again. It's relationships. And as someone who's been on both sides of that particular equation back when I had the commercial retail space, it was the same thing. I mean, we always had a proactive, good relationship in the best of times. That particular franchise, we ended up wanting to break our lease early. And, even though there was penalties all over the contract for doing so, because we had such a great relationship, we ended up walking away with no penalties whatsoever. And the landlord's sad to see us go. So it's the same type of thing, it trickles upwards when it comes to solutions. The tenants talking to the landlords talking to the banks, and just everybody seeing it from the other point of view, like you said. At the same time, of course, it's amazing to think about just the hits on cash flow. And from a business perspective, it's not always about the revenues that you're making or the profit margins that you're making. I mean, a lot of businesses do depend on that bi-weekly or monthly cash flow to keep things going for them. So you talk about the landlords might not be able to afford it after a couple of months, but even the banks, if they get into a point where they're taking a hit in order to be able to sustain people should this go longer, then that obviously will take all of us a longer time to recover from as a whole. So there's so many considerations, but you're right, be kind and be heartfelt. Now I have to touch on this subject with you. Some of us, it's just myself and my wife at home, and we've still had a couple of hiccups, had to reset some boundaries, make sure that those boundaries are respected, work through a couple of things, because even though for both of us, working remotely is always been the norm for us, much like you, I'm still out and about sometimes. I go out to sales call, I do a lot of live events, that kind of thing. Obviously, that's not happening right now. So, we've gotten on each other's nerves every now and then. A lot of people might have, a spouse and a couple of kids. And then there's your situation. I mean, what a generous man. You've got your wife, you've got 4 daughters, and your parents are all living with you. I cannot even begin to imagine how that's been Can you give us some insights to what's changed in regards to your family's daily routines, and how are you guys coping through it?
Sure. So it's I don't think we know yet what works or what doesn't work for us. Right now, I'm in the basement, and today is day one in the basement, trying a new uh, place to work from, because obviously, my office has been taken up by Lego pieces. So so I'm trying a different norm. So it's I don't think it's you can set boundaries or to be too strict about what works or what doesn't work. Uh, I'll tell you what does work for me is that come lunchtime or pre-lunch or post-lunch every day, I'll make sure I get away from my desk for a half hour, for 45 minutes, and we'll put something on YouTube like a yoga exercise or something like that, or a workout exercise, and we'll also just try to jump around a little bit, right? And that helps a little bit. It sort of calms the day down. It sort of breaks the day up a little bit, because it's not just TV. It's not just us trying to ask each other, so what's next, what's next, what's next, right? It breaks the day up. Everybody gets involved. The kids get involved. I get involved. My wife gets involved. So that helps. And then it's you try to do that once or twice a day. You have, like I said, what works today may not work tomorrow. And like I said, me working in the basement is a perfect example of that, right? I've been home for 2 weeks. Today is day one in the basement. I don't know. It might be the garage next. I was on a call with one of my colleagues from work, and he was working out of his garage because that's what made sense for him. He had the doors open. It was a quiet neighborhood. You can't hear anything from outside, but he had fresh air coming in, and that's what worked for him. So just be considerate. Just be aware that what works today may not work tomorrow, and be very, very flexible. I think that's all I can tell you. I think my kids are teaching me quite a lot about being energized, being playful, trying out different things, and you never say never, but you always continue to learn, right? Whether it's from your parents or your colleagues or your relatives or your friends. And most importantly, I think at this point we can all learn from our kids in terms of how to have fun, just even being at home, right? So it's a bit about that.
I'm actually loving everything you're saying there. A lot of our mentoring programs teach these same principles. It's, you don't have to know all the answers. You simply can come up with an educated idea of where to start, test it, measure it, and adjust accordingly. And even before, this self-isolation, that was still the way to live, whether it was in business, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's parenting. The only thing that's really changed here is, to your point, maybe the timeline has been condensed a bit. So instead of doing things a week or a month at a time, you do it for a day and you adjust. So I love that philosophy. It's proven successful before. Why would it be not any different now? And yeah, I think this is the first time it's actually come up in any of these calls, but you're right, that daily dose of fun. Now, it's not even about the exercise. It's about having everyone involved and just having some joy in your life, having a bit of joy and fun each and every day, just to get away from it, even though you can't get away from it, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I love that insight. I think that's probably one of those aha moments for me, because I do have fun every single day, and I didn't realize just how critical that's been for my wife and I to make the transitions work that we're going through. Is just doing silly things. We've been doing exercise dance videos, and I'll tell you something. That's uncomfortable, but it's been a lot of fun. So yeah. Now let's get back to a little bit of the finance side then. So in your industry, first of all, tell us if you can, to whatever level of detail you're legally allowed to tell us, what specifically type of things are you monitoring, and are you watching, and are you advising people
on? Okay, so I'll speak a bit generically, but I'll tell you what I do first, right? So for my day job, I work for a large insurance company where I look at look after all of the corporate functions from a finance perspective. So that means sales, marketing, IT, technology, all the programs associated with it, their internal budgets and whatnot. And I've been doing that for close to 20 years or so. At the same time, one of the things I do is that I'm sort of a financial advisor as well, I guess you can say that, in terms of looking after some assets for some of my clients and whatnot. I've got a management consulting company that I work through with some strategy consulting for some corporations, mostly local corporations, and as well as being the instructor for UFT. So if you take a look at my overall viewpoint, and again, so it's a bit murky and it's a bit clouded because again, I have a lot of different lens that I look at things from. Predominantly from a financial perspective, at the end of the day, what you're trying to make sure is that what are the metrics that you don't want to fail, or what are the metrics that you don't want to lose, and which are those metrics, and how does that work? So at my day job, I'm looking at the slowness in our revenue or the increase in our expenses, and that's just not right now. It's just generally speaking, right? I'm not speaking about COVID-19. I'm talking about general metrics, right? We look at our expense ratios. We look at our growth curves. We look at the amount of new business that comes in monthly, right? And what's the value of the new business as opposed to what's the value of the continued business, right? And how do you start thinking about those things a bit differently? We take a look at which clients are we interacting with, what type of partnerships we can create, and I would say that's something that actually goes across the board. And you hit a bit on this earlier in terms of the relationship aspect, right? So when we take a look at some of the partnerships we can create, and I look at partnerships not just at my day job, but also across the board for all of my other activities, in terms of what are the partnerships that I want to create and leverage and maintain. And it's not always about who can help me. And I think if you start with thinking who can help me, that's the wrong approach. I think it's more about who can I help. Because if you help somebody, like I said, and I mentioned karma initially earlier on, you're bound to at some point in time, for some business to come back to you sooner or later, right? So it's always about, go into any conversation and say, how can I help somebody else? What is the skill set that I bring that somebody else can leverage? And I think most of your listeners can do that as well, because they're all small business or medium-sized business experts in their own realm, and they can always help somebody, right? Your business may be closed a little bit due to COVID-19 and whatnot, but otherwise you have a skill set. Can you advise somebody how to do something, right? Even if it's just filling out some paperwork, and that can all be done through Zoom and whatnot. So so again, I look at partnerships both from a corporation perspective as well as from a personal perspective in terms of some of my other activities, and how do I either grow those relationships or partnerships, or how do I enhance those partnerships? I look at that. Continuing along, it's for the last little while, the last 3-4 weeks, we've obviously been focused a lot on employee health at work. So that's also something that we're looking at to make sure that all of our employees are taken care of, that they are set up properly to be able to work from home, that they have time in the day to get up and exercise and walk away from the desk, so that they don't necessarily get just stuck in one place, even though it's their home, that they have an opportunity to walk around. And frequent touch points, right? And frequent touch points with my employees, with my colleagues, with my team members in terms of how they're holding up. That also helps. But a lot of the focus the last 3-4 weeks, I would say, has shifted to employee health and employee well-being, and rightfully so.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you say that, because for some corporations, I mean, there's work culture specialists. We work with distributed teams and developing remote work cultures. It always seems, though, that the typical idea of corporate is that we're corporate drones, right? That for the most part, employee health is really just kind of an ancillary idea, whereas really what we're focused on is productivity and what can you give to the company. So I know that that trend has been changing for the last decade or so, and we're seeing more, especially with the millennials becoming the majority of the workforce, more social enterprise, more flexibility in work hours, work locations, even how those metrics are set and measured. And now here we are again with this incredible opportunity to really focus on employee well-being first and foremost. So what's been interesting for me working with our clients, and I'm sure you're in the same situation, is figuring out not just what to implement temporarily so that we can continue to exist as a company, because back to the earlier point, we need to be able to survive in order to serve more people, but also, you know, considerations for what are we going to carry forward as things normalize, right? Because there's got to be that point where if you're going to invest a certain amount of money in a certain amount of time as a company, you got to think, okay, this is not a temporary measure necessarily. This is something that is a fundamental pivot for us and will continue to go forward. So with your clients, what are some of the common challenges, some of the common fears that have bubbled up for them during the last 3-4 weeks? And what are some of the creative solutions that you've come up with for them that maybe you've never had to come up with before? Like what has been exciting and fun for you, and, you know, at the same time terrifying and scary for them?
So, so the people that I do work with, or the businesses that I am working with on that side, the things that we have talked about has been about uh, maintenance. And I want to use the word liberally in terms of maintenance of their revenue streams as much as possible, or their cash flows as much as possible, maintenance of their overall business, and everything that has to do with their business or businesses. Um, from a financial asset perspective, it's more about, you know, some of them do have some cash sitting on the sidelines. When's the right time to get back in the market? When's not the right time to get back in the market? So things that excite me are always about the, you know, when we start talking about the future rather than the present, right? I think, and that's a piece that I would say that comes a bit naturally to me in terms of just thinking forward in terms of 12, 18 months out, in terms of, you know, if you're able to get past this, and again, you know, and I think we will get past this, what should we do? And, you know, if you wait for 18 months to make some of those decisions, you probably have lost some a big chunk of what you would have gained by that time. So things that excite me, like I said, you know, it's always talking about the future, it's always talking about 12, 18, 24, 36 months out. And what are the decisions that each business or individual can or possibly could make, myself included in that conversation. So obviously, I mean, without going into too many specifics about some aspects of it, I'd been working with a business, with a partner of mine, a client of mine, had about $350,000, $400,000 invested in the market. Obviously, that's lost quite a big chunk of money from that perspective. Runs, you know, I would say 2 or 3 of those print shops that you see has 1 or 2 UPS stores as well. So has, you know, it's just, so, you know, so he's got a lot of different businesses that he's has. Obviously, a lot of those businesses are delivering zero cash flow right now. UPS is doing okay, but the other businesses, the print shops, are not doing any business because, like I said, if we're not going out, they're not making any money, right? So, you know, he's been able to ask some of his employees to see if they wanted to work instead of in the print shop, but at UPS, and start instead and be able to take leverage of that piece instead of having to let go of somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually helped him out quite a bit, and his employees as well. And some of those employees who are not able to, for a multitude of reasons, whether it's, you know, not able to pick up boxes and whatnot, you know, he's actually saying, okay, why don't you come in and just help answer phones, right? Be at the front of the store, right? So he's giving them good work, he's giving them constructive work, and I think the employees are also liking it because you know, it makes them feel part of the process, makes them feel that yes, they're helping, that they're earning their keep as well, and for him also, it's about the fact that he's he's doing whatever he can to make sure that he's able to continue to pay all of his employees and maintain cash at the same time. And some of the things that we've been talking about with him is, just looking at some of the assets that are out there that, next 4, 6, 8 weeks that, or businesses that potentially could come up. So obviously, print shops. Does he want to open up more? Because obviously, unfortunately, the reality is that some businesses are going to close, and a lot of real estate is going to be up for lease. Does he want to go into that piece? Does he want to potentially buy the locations where he himself is currently operating and be his own landlord? Right. So we've been discussing the pros and cons of some of those pieces, but obviously he's in a much better position than obviously than most people are out there, because he does have some cash flow. His business is, because he's diversified on the UPS side, and that's actually one business that's actually doing great right now. So it's actually been helping him rather than having it shut down as well. So like I said, we've been talking about what to do next 12, 18 months, and what are some of the decisions that he could possibly make. And, so those are some of the things that excite me.
Yeah, actually, me too. I love conversations like this. You touched on something that I've been talking to a lot of our own clients about is, and this is where you get into moral ethics, and it's a lot of fun. I love ethics in business, because there are some people that would be like, "What do you mean you're going to be buying up properties when we're at a low? You're just taking advantage of others because they can't continue to make their payments, or God forbid." Yeah, you're right. Not every business is going to succeed, and I want to qualify that. It's not just a lot of small businesses. There is a lot of large enterprises that are losing massive, like millions of dollars right now. And again, can't sustain that on a month to month basis, because you keep using the word wisely, cash flow. It's not about your revenues, it's about your cash flow. And so there's a lot of change happening. And something I've even been working on with some of our clients is, hey, now is the time to renegotiate your pricing with your vendors, right? If you can get a better rate now, why not? And again, the ethics of it, some people would be like, well, you're just taking advantage of the fact that everyone is hurting. The flip side of that, of course, is no, what we're doing is we're making sure that A, we can stay in business longer, and B, that they're at least getting business from us because they're willing to work with us. So it all circles back to that relationship. So I don't think it's fair for people to just put these blanket statements on how business works, because even in the best of times, when we're not going through a pandemic, I mean, that's the whole idea is to negotiate down as far as you can. So how is that different now, simply because we're going through this situation? So to your point, let's say, you're looking at buying the property your client's currently renting in. Well, guess what? If the landlord is struggling right now to the point where that becomes a viable option for them, then, they're fully capable of making that choice and saying, yeah, you know what, that would help us out a lot right now, because maybe they have other properties, back to what we we're talking about earlier, and having that sudden infusion of cash flow means, okay, I lose one of my commercial properties, but I'm going to be able to keep the other 6 going, or the other 10 going. So it's not as easy as just saying, yeah, that's right or that's wrong. It's really looking at how you can serve people on a case by case basis. So it's really fascinating talking about the ways we're going to move forward with these things. Now, as far as, any fear trends that you've seen in your clients, has there been any common concerns that they've come at you with? Like, is everybody like, oh, I wish my wife could just leave the house for the day? Or is it more just focused business oriented, worried about, significant losses in the market? Like you said, even for yourself, 45 to 60% losses. What seems to be the biggest common concern that you're finding economically for your clients? Oh, I've lost your audio, Imran.
No,
Hey.
sorry, I was on mute. So I'll answer the question a little bit differently. So pretty much every conversation that I have with all of my partners, clients, everybody, is always around how long do we think this is going to last? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? And how long do they need to prepare for? Because if you have a timeline in mind, you can help make decisions along those timelines, right? And the reality is that life will continue. Business will still need to happen. You and I will still need internet. You and I will still need water. We'll still need groceries. We'll still need electricity. We'll still need gasoline. There's a lot of things that life requires, and that life will continue. The only question is that there will be new businesses that will come out of this pandemic that will be great, and there will be some businesses that won't be viable anymore. And unfortunately, that's because of how we're going to be doing business going forward. So you touched on the fact that corporations are losing a lot of money earlier on, and yes, they are. One of their biggest expenses from a corporation perspective is real estate. Most corporations don't own their own real estate. They actually rent. They rent because there's a huge liability to own your own real estate. So they're on these long-term leases with real estate companies around, space in downtown. Once they are actually able to see that, hey, all of our employees are able to work from home on a regular basis, do they need that much space? Can they reduce it by 20, 40, 60%? And most of those decisions will come in the next 2 years, is my opinion, as leases come up for renewal and whatnot. What that will do is that will automatically enable some smaller businesses, believe it or not, to get space in areas where they couldn't previously get space in. So again, it's a cycle, right? So somebody leaves, but it's an opportunity for somebody else on that side. Coming back to your question, so again, the focus of some of the discussion, or most of the discussions that I have, is around how long will this last? What will be some of the newer business trends that we'll see? And I think that's where it starts. It's about, okay, how long do you think I need to prepare for? How long do I need to have cash flow for? Should I make decisions 3 months out, 6 months out, and 12 months out? And my answer to all of them is, I believe, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze for a second.
Bless you.
Thank you. My belief is that, if you look at how Wuhan has responded, it's taken them 3 to 4 months, and they've turned the curve, which means another 3 to 4 months, and things will be down to minimal at best there. So that's a turnaround of 6 to 8 months. We here in the West have the luxury of learning from some of their mistakes, and I think we're starting to see some of that. However, we need to learn to live by the rules. And if we're able to do that, I think we should be able to turn this around next three months also. And we'll start getting back to life as normal after that, in my opinion. But even all of that said, I always tell my clients, you can never predict where the bottom will be, so don't wait for the bottom. If you think something makes sense, and if you think you can hold on to it for at least a year or so, then go for it. If not, then don't go for it. My rule of thumb is always, you need to be able to hold on to any business, any property, any asset that you buy for at least a year. And like I said earlier, investing in financial assets or the stock market is like gambling. You are going to make a return in the long term, but in the short term, it is like gambling. It could be really volatile. So only put money in it that you don't need.
Right. Well, and it's a similar strategy. Like again, as a professor teaching business at U of T, I mean, we have a similar thing. Again, in the best of times, you should have 6 to 9 months of money set aside in case something happens. That's a very basic fundamental for businesses. Don't just be running broke all the time. And yet so many businesses run at a constant loss. To me, it's personally mind-boggling. Yet at the same time, you were talking about how we'll get back to normal. And I love that you use that phrase, because I completely disagree. And the reason I completely disagree is because we've learned historically you can never go back. So sure, are things going to normalize? We talked about this earlier. There's a lot of things that the way business processes are going to change for these large corporations. We talked about this earlier in the week with another guest about, yeah, absolutely. They're going to see they can reduce their expenses significantly through not having these leases, because people are able to work more effectively from home. So, the easiest way to reduce expenses is rent. So I'm super excited to see how that works out. But something we've been telling our clients and our students and the people we work with is, accept that today is the new norm. right? Like, sure, some pieces are going to change because they've been changing every day. But instead of saying, how long do you think it's going to take for us to get back to how it was? Well, no, why not just focus on this is how it is? What if it stayed this way forever? Right? And pivot accordingly to, are you able to do your business in a new and exciting and digital way? And for some, the answer is yes. For some, it's no. For some, it's pieces of it can be done. We haven't worked with a single client yet where we couldn't. I mean, we even have a plumber who is, like I said, a hands-on business, and we've transformed it to have a digital component now that helps with people's cash flows. And it's something unheard of in their industry. And yet here we are pivoting because this is unheard of in our history, within our generation at least. So it's interesting to see how things will normalize is the term I'm using, but I like to prep businesses to deal with the current reality as opposed to wanting to grieve what was and having, I'm not going to say misguided, but a false hope that it may get back to there. At the same time, you're right. The market will recover. The sky's not falling. The world will continue. There's still businesses running because they're essential and we need them. So some things aren't going to fundamentally change. But I think overall, there is going to be a significant shift to the way things are done going forward. And yeah, it's going to open a ton of opportunities. Some of the old dinosaurs, the phrase I've been using this week is what we're actually witnessing for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, I believe, is the demise of the traditional rat race, right? It's gone. It's gone. Everybody's at home. So that whole mentality of that 9 to 5 rat race is just evaporated within the course of weeks. And now, of course, that's why everyone's mostly not panicking anymore, but concerned and fearful of the unknown, because we are now having to chart a new way of doing things. And that's exciting, right? It can be exciting or it could be terrifying. And it's really how you look at it. And as a futurist myself, I'm always excited to look at what the trends are and what's coming and what opportunities exist. And it's refreshing, Imran, to hear someone like-minded that is looking for the best of what can be starting today. So thank you for sharing your views on that.
Oh, my pleasure, Marcus. My pleasure.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to wrap it up because I think we've had some really intense conversation, which is great. Give you a chance to get back to your day. I appreciate it. Is there any words of specific wisdom you'd like to share with our audience before we do close the call?
I'm just going to come back to how we started in terms of, we started the conversation around community and being Canadian. And I just want to remind everybody that try to stay true to that as much as possible. Look out for your neighbors, look out for your community, look out for your province, look out for your country, and do what you can, because obviously everybody's hurting a little bit right now. Do what you can, and we're all going to pull together from this together.
Agreed. A little bit of extra love and patience goes a long way right now. Awesome. Thank you so much for making the time today, Imran. Greatly appreciated. Please give my love to the family. I'll talk to all of you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Marcus. See you guys.